This is Steven Diego, and you're now tuned in to Breaking Down the Breakdown. On today's episode, we are going to talk about what it's like to grow up confused about your sexuality. Hello, everybody. Welcome in to another edition of Breaking Down the Breakdown with... who else? Steven Diego? Yeah, that's me. For those of you watching this on YouTube, I would like to apologize that you can see how messy my bed is. Actually, you can barely see it, but I picked this angle because the sunlight is hitting just right. But welcome in. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is a very important episode, as is every other episode, TBH. But today, not because I have a special guest, but as many of you may know, it is Pride Month. I do identify as pansexual. I did not always know this. And I felt like, you know what? It's about time to kind of address what it was like growing up and not knowing exactly what you are or what you represent or who you are, right? Sorry. Rather that, not what. I mean, yeah, I didn't know what I was. So this is a personal story. But what better time to talk about this than now? As a lot of us are celebrating Pride, both, the community and our allies, to kind of break away from the whole, my God, this is so much fucking fun, we're celebrating ourselves. I felt like I really wanted to converse about, I don't want to say severity, that's a little too extreme, but about the seriousness of not knowing your own identity, right? For a lot of people nowadays, they identify, or rather they attach these identity, and I don't want to say issues, but, well, in some ways, just not knowing your identity, a lot of people who are not within the community kind of attach it, like they attach a negative connotation towards that. And, I think there is one thing that we have now that we didn't have when I was growing up, which is social media. I mean, we did have social media, but it wasn't like now, right? Like, there are not a lot of conversations about X, Y, and Z, specifically within the communities. And I think a lot of people, if they do want to get educated on said things, they totally can go and do it. And that is actually something that I wish I had growing up, because I felt like maybe my life would be a lot easier. For a lot of people, they know that, if you've listened to this podcast before, a lot of my traumas did come from my upbringing, and definitely not knowing my identity kind of put fuel towards that fire. And this is why I wanted to talk about it today, because as much as there are so many things that you can find on social media and online about, oneself, it's a very personal experience. You still have to navigate through channels that, if you have no one to guide you through, can be very scary. And even if you have someone to guide you through these things, they will not be able to see it, or they will not be able to understand, even though they've been through it before. Everyone's experiences within this journey really varies, right? Like, it's very unique. There are things in which we can kind of agree on. There are things in which we can oh my God, have you guys ever had that experience, or this and that? And of course, there would be fun story times or not so fun story times like that. But everybody's journey with figuring out who they are, it really comes out different. And so for today, I kind of wanted to focus on how I came out to be the way that I am now. Growing up, and for a lot of people who live in a third world country like the Philippines, back in my days because I'm old, during those times, growing up, and there would be, people in the community, there would be gay people around, and they would always kind of look down on them. It's actually very interesting, the dynamics, because there would be groups of friends, and there would be, like the token gay person, the token lesbian. Because back like in the Philippines, I don't know right now what it's like, but I never actually heard of the term bisexual until I came to Canada. In the Philippines, apparently there is a term there for it, but growing up, you never heard that. Somebody was either a lesbian or somebody was gay, and that was that. And so, yes, I'm very old. It's very ancient. This is what it was like growing up for me. And not only that, the 90s were a different time. There would be, friend groups that would have someone represent either the gays or the lesbians, and they would be cool. But beyond that, outside the friend group, it's almost as if people just can't accept that that's actually more than fine. That who they are is perfect, just the way that they are. And a lot of this truly does come from, the influences of the Catholic Church in the Philippines, right? Because we all know what the Catholic religion thinks about homosexuality. And so, for a lot of people, they are God-fearing people, and it was hard for them to accept these things. Even though there are definitely certain things in the Bible that are frowned upon, yet they're so proud of doing. But that's not my story to fucking tell. We're not going to get into that. But, so it makes it very difficult living in an environment in which you are pretty much an op. For those of you who don't know what an op means, you're the opposition, where you are the enemy, right? Where you are the other. No matter how many times you try to seek acceptance for being who you are, you can find friends who will definitely be there for you. But beyond that group, and you can't always be that group, especially when you're a kid, right? Beyond that group, you're on your own, kid, even with your family, right? There would be times where it's almost like gay conversion camp, where they would be like, oh, you just have to hang out with your cousin because they're very butch or whatever. And, like maybe you'll lose your mannerisms. And it's very toxic, of course. And I really hope that doesn't happen today. I really hope that shit stops, right? I feel like it's definitely one of the more traumatic experiences I've ever had. And clearly it didn't work. I just learned how to hide it a lot better. I do sympathize with people, and I empathize with people who, even though they are living their truth, like what I said before, the environment they're in does not allow them for much growth. If anything, they're being put in this box in which to say, oh, okay, so you represent this community. Of course you can be with everybody else. Of course you can have these sorts of opportunities, but please remain in your safe little box, because we don't want other people kind of ending up like you. That's actually one of the biggest things about growing up and not knowing who I was. I was afraid to tell people just exactly how I felt. Granted, when I was growing up, I wouldn't say I never found guys attractive, but I definitely liked girls. And when I started kind of getting curious as to like, ooh, why do I feel like this guy is also attractive, it was like not knowing that it's a possibility to be attracted to both genders, to be attracted to any gender at the same time, to be honest, there was this moment within me in which I felt like, what was wrong with me? If I told someone that, I actually kind of think guys are cute too, immediately I would be just gay. No matter how many times I say, but I like this girl right now, but I've liked this girl for so long. Because you said that you were attracted to a guy, you're gay. And I think what's even sadder about that whole entire interaction, what's even worse, is the fact that why is it so bad to be gay? There's nothing wrong with being gay. At all. But you see, and this is something that I notice even to this very day. I feel like we're kind of going back in time in terms of how people interact with people within the community. Because there would always be people that they feel are outspoken, or they feel that you're shoving your sexuality down my throat. Like, look, nobody's doing that, right? If there are things that you don't agree with, there are things you don't want to hear, you don't want to see, skip past it, scroll past it. These people are just telling their truth, right? These people are just living their truth. These people finally have a platform in which they can talk about being themselves. And it's okay to agree to disagree as long as it's not hurting anybody. If somebody's stories are hurting you, well, shoot, I mean, maybe something happened to you that you need to talk to a therapist about, right? Like, these are things where I feel like the way that society today is othering people within the community, it's evolved, right? It's like evolved hatred. Before it was, one of those, I'm going to beat you up because you are gay. I mean, I feel like that still happens today. And I really hope it doesn't anymore. But just because it's not on the news doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, right? And these are one of the biggest fears that people have with finding out who they truly are. That's definitely one of my fears. It was one of those situations in which I was able to put it to the back burner and say, okay, well, I'm just not going to talk about how I truly feel. Up until, mid high school, when I was like, whoa, I'm just definitely confused. And I remember during that time, I would confide in people to see if they would feel the same way. I would talk about things, just to kind of because again, back in the day, we did not have apps, especially when you're in high school. You're not even 18 yet, right? Like, apps nowadays, you have to be 18, which thank God, it's for adults, right? But for, people who are still kids, right? Who are still minors, just imagine that back in the day, there's no social media. You don't know who actually is within the community or who's not. You're trying to make friends, and when you're trying to tell your stories, some people kind of get icked out, creeped out, weirded out, because they're like, ooh, I don't really get that. And it's one of those, I don't want to say it's a game, but it's definitely you talk to people to kind of get a feel as to, are they giving off this vibe or not? And even then, you can't really right out say, so are you or are you not? Because they're in the same boat, right? Where they're afraid to admit it, because what if you're actually not? So it made it very difficult to figure out one's identity, because there's nobody else to talk to. I did not know I was pansexual until maybe a few years ago. I didn't know that was a thing. Right? Because even then, when I realized, okay, well, I like both, so maybe I'm bisexual, right? But even knowing that, I felt not always, not all the time, right? When people ask me what I like about people, that was a very hard question to answer, right? And then I started realizing I actually like people because, like if they're funny, I go off vibes. And I don't care what you have in between. Like, truly, like, I really don't. I really fucking don't. Right? If you're a funny person, you're cool in my books. Yeah, we'll date. Right? But I didn't know that was a thing. And so I'm really grateful that nowadays I'm still, I'm still living. That I'm able to experience what it's like to be in a world where information actually thrives. And I wonder if to this day there are people that's struggling with their identities, albeit in a different way. One example I have with why I started thinking about these things would be when I stream on Twitch and I have that tag. I have the LGBT tag on, even the pansexual tag on. More often than not, there would be someone coming into chat to troll. Someone coming in, talk about Darwinism. Someone coming in to outright say that, LGBT people are trash. Someone coming in just to berate me for being part of the community. It doesn't matter if you have people they're called mods, who help you out to kind of block these people. What was said was already said. And for people who watch these mediums, right, who are kind of figuring out what their identity is like, or if, like they're going on this journey, that could be very scary. Here goes somebody that you like watching just being themselves, and just some random person that you will never know can just come in like that and start attacking you. If this was real life, I mean, shit, are people still brave like that? I really fucking hope not. That's fucking scary. But again, right, that's an added factor. If you're still out, if you want to be out there, and just be able to say, okay, this is me, and that's that. For people who are not used to these things, that could be a huge thing as to why people are still in the closet. If you go to different apps, there's still people that say, they're very discreet. And you kind of wonder why. If you're not cheating on anybody, if you don't have a relationship, right? Sometimes you just don't want people to be in your business. That's different. Right? But there are people that would definitely would not send any photos. They say they can only meet you at this point, at this time, where there's, it's 2 hours away from where they live. And it makes you wonder, are you dating someone? No. An interaction I had would be, I just don't want my friends and family to know. And it's so sad. Because being able to claim your identity is so freeing. You're able to be yourself. But I do understand that, especially with the way that the world is going right now, every single day that you claim your identity, every single day that you raise that flag and you tell people who you are, every single moment that you're open about your sexuality, you're leaving yourself open to being attacked on all fronts. And it's a very scary thing. So much scarier if you're, a public figure, because you don't know these people. Sometimes I would get people in my DMs threatening me. For what? Sometimes I would get, a sentence about people like me need to disappear because God did not intend for us to live this way. And, these are people that you don't know who the fuck they are. It's untraceable. There's no pictures in their profiles. People just like to do that now. A lot of people can, they can brush it off and be like, oh, another fucking troll, right? But what about people who are going through mental health disorders, like me? Do you know what it's like to receive a threat when you have OCD? When your intrusive thoughts, in some ways, I don't want to say becomes real because it really doesn't, but there's an event in which you can identify as an intrusive thought. Only someone actually said it. When that clashes, your fears and your realities, they mesh into one. It's an anxiety attack waiting to happen, especially if you don't know your tools, especially if you're not well versed in dealing with an anxiety attack. It's a very scary thing. And this is why I wanted to talk about it. Because growing up, we didn't know who to go to whenever we would feel these things. We didn't know where we were safe. And so a lot of people, they end up keeping it to themselves. I don't know if people notice sometimes, especially if you're within my age, how many people actually ended up coming out and you realize, oh wow, they're actually in the community. There are so many people who try to lie to themselves to believe that this is the kind of life that they should live, that they want to live, because they don't know anything else, because they're scared. But they hear stories upon stories upon stories of other people, and they're finally living their truth and say, actually, this is me. And how many people actually vilify them because they're leaving a whole family behind? These are things that people in my generation have to face, because a lot of us lived under fear. Because in some ways we knew who we were, but we also knew what that would entail. Well, actually, we didn't know what that would entail. We knew only the bad things that could happen. And this is why really understanding who you are and being okay with it and accepting it is so important. Because only then can you really surround yourself with a great support system. This is me dragging you out the closet. I'm kidding. No one can do that but yourself. Like, you do it when you're comfortable, right? All I'm saying is that if you are confused about your identity, then definitely who you are now is not who you're meant to be. And that is okay. I've had friends who experimented, right? And I don't think experiment is a bad word at all. They're trying to figure out who they were. And, they realized they're not within the community. They realized, oh, okay, well, that definitely was not for me. And that was okay. Some of them are open about it. Yeah, I know, I've tried this, I've tried that. It just wasn't for me. Some of them, never speak about it. And that's also fine. I think what I'm trying to convey here in this episode, right, is I wanted to share how scary it is to pretty much come out and figure your shit out, figure yourself out. Because there are so many factors out there that could really harm you. But at the end of the day, you have to understand there are so many people supporting you on this journey. You don't even know it yet. And this especially goes out to the people, within my era who to this day are afraid of coming out or coming to terms with who they are. Now is the time. Let go of all that baggage. Let go of that weight on your shoulder of having to live two lives one in your head and one outside your head, right? Because I'm not saying that everybody's cheating. It's not that, right? But sometimes it contributes to the misery. And if you were just honest with yourself and everybody else, that's when you can start on this journey of self-discovery and figuring out the things that you need to do in order to be happier with yourself. And everything else will follow suit. It's tough. I know. I never said it was easy. But again, this is your sign. You are supported. You are loved. It's like a Hallmark fucking card. But I hate to cut it short, but I really wanted to leave on that note. You know, next time I'm going to try to bring more guests, talk about their experiences coming out. I'll talk about my experiences coming out for sure. That was not a fun one. I don't think there's ever been a coming out story in which it was a party. If there is, you know what? Please contact me. All right, you can follow us on Instagram, Breaking Down the Breakdown Pod. If you have a story like that, honestly, it's Pride Month. There are so many people I know who are saying, well, we're straight month. And it's like, bro, that's like every fucking day outside of June. Or we're not going to politicize things here on this podcast. I want to focus on mental health. But if you are somebody who is not an ally, and you stumbled upon this podcast not realizing that I am in the community, I will say to you what I say every single time that I end this podcast. Please be kind. Please be compassionate. Because you don't know what the other person is going through. You don't know what people are going through at all. And sometimes all it takes is being kind for a person to realize they're going to be okay. You may not agree with their lifestyle. But if they've never done anything wrong, who are you to subject these people to hate? Just a food for thought. Thank you. If this turns you into an ally. But this has been Breaking Down the Breakdown. My God. There are so many things I want to say that I'm just kind of like, no. We're going to end there. We're not going to. Anyways, thank you again. Happy Pride, y'all. I hope to hear from y'all soon. This has been Breaking Down the Breakdown with me, Steven Diego. Thank you so much. I love you all. Please be safe out there. It's Pride. As fun as it is, that's when people are usually hate crime. Anyways, love you guys. Bye.